Modernization versus Dependency Theory. Modernization versus dependency theory is one of the most important debates in the study of development and global inequality. Both theories try to explain why some countries grow rich and powerful while others remain poor and struggle to improve living standards. They approach the question from very different angles, and understanding both helps us see how global relations, history, politics, and economics shape the fate of nations. Modernization theory focuses on internal changes within a country, arguing that societies develop by adopting modern values, technologies, and institutions. Dependency theory, on the other hand, looks outward, claiming that poor countries are trapped in unequal relationships with wealthy countries that benefit from their weakness. To understand this debate in simple terms, it helps to explore where these theories came from, what they suggest, and why they continue to shape discussions about development today. Modernization theory became popular after the Second World War, at a time when many new countries were gaining independence. Scholars and policymakers wanted to understand how these countries could grow their economies and build strong states. Modernization thinkers argued that development is a step-by-step process. They believed that all societies move from traditional ways of life to modern ways, just as Western countries had done earlier. According to this view, traditional societies are based on customs, religious authority, rural agriculture, and close family ties. They develop slowly because people are hesitant to change. Modern societies, by contrast, value science, technology, education, democracy, and individual achievement. Modernization supporters argued that if poor countries adopted these values and invested in technology, education, and industrialization, they would eventually become developed like Western nations. This theory makes development seem like a natural, internal process. If a country wants to grow, it simply needs to modernize its institutions, improve education, promote industrial growth, and encourage a culture of innovation. The main barriers, according to this perspective, are outdated traditions, unskilled labor, weak governance, and lack of investment. Once these obstacles are removed, progress becomes possible. This idea was appealing because it suggested that any country could succeed if it followed the right steps. However, critics argued that this view ignores historical realities. Many poor countries were colonized, exploited, or controlled by powerful nations for centuries. Their resources were extracted, their labor was cheapened, and their economies were shaped to serve foreign interests. Even after independence, they remained tied to global markets in ways that limited their progress. This argument led to the rise of dependency theory, which directly challenged the assumptions of modernization theory. Dependency theory emerged in Latin America during the 1960s, where scholars noticed that even when countries tried to modernize, they remained dependent on wealthier nations. According to this theory, the world is divided into two groups: the center, rich, industrialized countries, and the periphery, poor, developing countries. The center controls advanced technology, global trade, and political power. The periphery supplies raw materials, cheap labor, and agricultural products. This global system benefits the center while keeping the periphery underdeveloped. Dependency theorists argue that development is not simply a matter of internal reforms. Poor countries cannot grow because the global economic system is designed to keep them in a weak position. For example, when developing countries export raw materials like minerals or crops, they receive low prices. But when they import manufactured goods from rich countries, they pay high prices. This creates a constant imbalance. Wealthy nations become wealthier, while poor nations struggle to catch up. Even foreign aid or investment, according to this theory, can deepen dependency because it gives powerful countries more control over weaker ones. This theory highlights how global power shapes national development. It suggests that poverty is not the result of tradition or laziness but a consequence of historical exploitation and unequal economic relationships. To break free from dependency, theorists argue that poor countries need to reduce reliance on foreign markets, build local industries, protect their economies, and create regional cooperation among developing nations. Both theories have strengths and weaknesses. Modernization theory explains how internal improvements such as education, governance reforms, and technological advancement can support development. It highlights the importance of cultural change, innovation, and strong institutions. It also gives hope that progress is possible for all societies. However, it oversimplifies history and ignores how global power imbalances affect development. It assumes that Western paths to development can be copied everywhere, which is not always practical or fair. Dependency theory provides a powerful explanation for global inequality by reminding us that economic relationships are not neutral. It shows how wealthier countries benefit from cheap resources and labor from poorer countries. It also explains why many developing nations struggle despite making serious efforts to grow. However, some critics argue that dependency theory can be too pessimistic, suggesting that poor countries have little chance of improving unless they cut ties with global markets. In reality, many countries have succeeded by combining global trade with smart internal reforms. In today's world, discussions about development often blend ideas from both theories. Countries need internal reforms, good governance, education, and innovation to grow. At the same time, they also need fairer global trade, protection from exploitation, and stronger control over their own resources. Many development programs now focus on empowering local industries, improving labor rights, expanding access to education, and ensuring that international partnerships are mutually beneficial rather than exploitative. Modernization and dependency theory are not just academic ideas. They shape how governments make policies, how organizations design development projects, and how people understand global inequality. The debate between these theories helps us see that development is complex. It is shaped by both internal decisions and external pressures. Some countries develop quickly because they have good institutions and strong leadership. Others struggle because they face unfair trade systems, historical disadvantages, or political instability. Understanding this complexity helps create better solutions for reducing inequality and supporting long-term progress. Ultimately, the goal of development is to ensure that all people can live with dignity, security, and opportunity. Whether through internal reform or global change, societies must work to create fair systems where growth benefits everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more educational content.